Ivy, Lee's wife, is out for a bachelorette party. He had little reason to worry. Ivy was the most faithful wife a man could ever ask for during a happy decade. Lee knew that Ivy would be one of the most responsible ladies at the party. Ivy would steer the younger ladies away from the really big trouble, since the point of the evening was to find some funny trouble. Lee understood that his job, while at home, was to be attentive to what help his wife might need. It started with a clock. He joked to himself that he had to keep track of time in order to protect the ladies during their entertainment. If the girls returned at 10, then something went wrong so quickly. If they returned within an hour or two, they found a relatively harmless, albeit adult, adventure. Arriving later than 2 meant that there was likely to be some serious trouble, the scale of which increased as the clock continued to tick. The possibility of troubles moving from an adult topic to infidelity also increased over time. And yet, that's why Ivy went, to get weak or drunk friends away from trouble, especially this kind. Lee knew that Ivy would accompany the others home, so she would return quite late. Arriving late didn't necessarily mean something terrible had happened. Perhaps the girls just needed to sober up. It was past 2:30, and he began his mental checklist of what he might need. A car, water, blankets for warmth, shelter, and cover. A credit card for bail and plastic car sheets for the inevitable vomit also made his list. He tried to smile, forcing himself to rest. He looked at his watch at 3. So far, there has been no call asking for help. Damn, he was tired. Sitting half the night without an emergency to focus your energy on was hard. He dozed off. At 3:20, he began to hear noises, thuds in the middle of the night. Lee rose from a very light sleep. Reflexively, he extended his hand to Ivy next to him, just because. She wasn't there. His sleepy mind ran through possible explanations. She was in the bathroom, etc. As he rose to a higher level of consciousness, Lee heard a noise downstairs. Was it rearrangement of furniture? He woke up instantly. Now he heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Was there someone in the house who shouldn't have been there? The sound of footsteps did not sound like the sound of a man who knew confidently where he was going, or perhaps how he was getting there. Lee stood up from the shadows of his bedroom, reaching into the hallway to turn on the hallway light, temporarily blinding himself with the sudden brightness. The man on the steps was in an even worse situation. His wife, Ivy, nearly fell backwards when the light hit her like a physical blow. Lee instantly rushed down the stairs and hugged her, keeping her from falling. Lee's sudden appearance and actions startled her again. Ivy looked at her husband, her concern and shock giving way to an honest smile. Then she saw his reaction to her, his face showing concern, probably because he had to rush to her aid. Ivy smiled again. Lee was her night protector. Now she needed to calm him down. "Sorry, honey, I'm pretty drunk," Ivy said cheerfully, her tongue slurred. Seeing his growing concern, her face instantly changed from fear to horror. Seeing her husband's joy that the crisis was over, with the added bonus of being in his arms, Ivy relaxed. Lee attributed her emotional display to her intoxication. He felt his worries melt away after problems followed one after another. A possible burglar, his wife falling down the stairs, and her drunken state. Now that Ivy was home and safe, it seemed funny, except that she arrived in this condition. His anxiety grew again. He asked her directly. Ivy smiled at him. No. The limo driver probably made as much as the dancers. Ivy smiled at Lee, snuggling into his embrace, letting out a contented purr. He hugged her tighter, eliciting another sigh. "So, baby, want to have some fun?" Lee asked with a playful tone. "I'm already happy I have you, but I need a shower," Ivy responded, running her fingers through his hair. Lee carried her up the stairs more with his strength than with hers. He kissed her and enjoyed it, pulling away with a wrinkled nose. She noticed this and asked, "Sorry, honey, were you waiting for me, or did I wake you? My hair smells like smoke. I'm sweaty and maybe I'm throwing up." Lee looked down where they were still hugging tightly. He didn't feel any wet spots pressed against him. "You are ill?" "No, it's from a couple of other girls. I still need a shower." "It's past 3 in the morning." "I know. Sorry, we had to get everyone home and settled. Some were sick. Lee was pretty sure his wife meant sick people. I felt like a chaperone on a school trip. She paused. Some had romantic problems. She winked at him. I had to reassure a few guys that their girlfriends were really drunk, but still faithful when we got them back. I'm not sure you calmed them down in that state. If the chaperone was that drunk, then the regular partygoers should be completely out of the game. No, I did it after we took them all home. She looked up. A strange expression appeared on her face. Real emotions overwhelmed her. She asked her husband, "Why do girls think it's fun to get others drunk and try to corrupt them? Especially brides. They can ruin lives." Ivy finished her thought with a barely noticeable twang. Lee tensed with worry. Ivy smiled, shaking her head as he asked, "Rough ride?" "Yes, friendly competition turns into drunken outbursts of 'I'll show you.'" "And we had a problem with the bride?" Lee asked. A terrible expression flashed across Ivy's face. It then disappeared, causing Lee even more concern. "Is she all right?" Lee asked more seriously, considering the context of what his wife had just said. "It will be a little difficult," his wife replied sullenly. "Oh," he said carefully. "Yes," Ivy looked down. "Some of the drunks lied to those of us who were still sane. They had all left for a few minutes before we realized that the two girls had both told us that the other was going to take the bride to the toilet. You know, typical little kids' tricks to confuse the parents. The little sneaks gave the bride a private dance." Ivy looked down again, her face darkening. She was very drunk. Damn, he thought, was it so serious that the wedding might be in jeopardy? He decided to let Ivy tell the whole story at her own pace. This way, it will be more coherent. Lee wondered how bad it was that Ivy had gotten so drunk. Ivy looked down again as Lee sat them down on the edge of the bed to rest her tired, shaky body. She continued to explain, "We realized that the bad girls were giving the bride their type of entertainment. They took her away. We found her. She was very drunk. She was pleasing the dancer." Ivy stopped, fuming at the thought of what her supposed friends had done. She then softened, expressing terrible sympathy and sadness, controlling her face. "I don't know how her fiancé feels about this. I know she's not looking to cheat. She wasn't taken in a way that would make her pregnant." Ivy suddenly looked at Lee, almost desperately hoping that he would understand. The poor girl barely knew what she was doing, and I doubt she really knew. It had to be arranged by those bitches. Even if she didn't initiate it, even if she's not responsible, hell, even if she doesn't remember it, most guys still won't be happy about that fact. And damn, this isn't the kind of trouble she caused herself. Ivy looked straight at her husband. It's probably not her fault. Her friends got her too drunk. Why bring it to this? Why arrange this? I really don't know if she'll even remember this." Ivy was full of passion, stunned by the actions of some of the women. A wave of emotion flashed across her face. Lee suddenly snapped out of any romantic mood and went completely into protective mode. Ivy felt his sudden push as he held her, knocking her out of her thoughts. Lee couldn't help but wonder. Ivy had this weird look on her face. "Oh, honey, sorry, I was over there somewhere," Ivy added, looking defeated, although noticeably sobered up. She realized that her husband was reading her face. She got scared and blushed. For a second, Lee thought he noticed something. He suddenly felt ill. He wanted to ask if his wife wanted to tell him something. He felt great sadness. Ivy looked at his face and gasped, wondering what he noticed. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes and finally breaking through her voice. "No, honey, I never would. You don't have to worry about me." Was there something in her voice? Was she speaking out of panic? Ivy stammered, searching for words, becoming increasingly frustrated. Lee felt the ground disappear from under his feet. "How about this?" he thought. "This is a real feeling." Ivy spoke, dispelling the oppressive fog. "No, dear, no. Do not worry. I was a loyal, proud wife. The thought of having another man with me. Oh God, it's terrible. Awfully." She began to tremble. Lee said. This feeling seemed completely sincere. Ivy pulled herself together. The limousine driver was an off-duty cop. I thought that was very helpful. She was able to keep us out of any mischief as we returned the girls to their stunned boyfriends. She, the cop, was a woman, if I hadn't mentioned it. Ivy looked at Lee nervously. The situation with the bride was dramatic. After we got her and the others home, there was some wine left. We other attendants killed it. We had a driver. We had one hell of a fun night. We sat in front of her house. Her husband got out, and the three of us sat in the back of the limousine and drank and talked about it. We deserved it. Ivy saw Lee thinking, he knows I don't drink like that without him. He's trying to figure out how to put this together. I need to help him. Honey, I smell like sweat and smoke, but can you? She held out her hands in invitation. Lee hugged her tighter than before. He thought she wouldn't want him so close if she was guilty of something. He thought about the situation. She really needed a shower, so she hadn't taken one yet. All the evidence was still there, he reminded himself. He found himself trying to secretly check the condition of her clothes as he undressed her. No marks on that side of her neck. Bra, yes, and in place, the clasp is fine. Underpants, everything is fine. He cursed himself for this. I reminded myself that it was both of their jobs to protect their marriage. Ivy stopped them right in front of the bathroom with a new request. Take me to your shower, she said with exaggerated drama. Lee was still holding her in a tight embrace, which she seemed to really enjoy. She turned to look him straight in the eye. Oh, they were so green, like the color of the ocean. She could get lost in his eyes. Ivy had to shake herself back into reality. She had to put Lee first here. Let me help you take inventory. She pressed herself against his chest as he took off her jacket and began to take off her shirt. She snuggled further into his arms as Lee laughed, seeing how poorly he did his secret check. Ivy knew she had pushed her wonderful husband to test her integrity. She felt terrible. She tried to mutter, sorry, but stopped herself, making up what to say instead. She stood back enough to look at Lee, but careful not to break his embrace. No, love, you don't have to worry. You. Ivy changed the direction of her speech. Baby, the thought of losing you, not having your love. She flinched at the thought of it, and tears flowed from her eyes. I would never do that to you. I took my wedding vows very seriously. You have given me so much. I really adore you. Lee felt adoration for Ivy now and throughout their life together. Ivy seemed even more in love with him after the wedding than when they were dating. Ivy was still looking intently into his eyes. I wasn't the main chaperone at this party. I didn't know the bride as well as others. But honey, some friends, will push others to do things like that. Some guys and girls don't they object to small advances. Some guys don't mind guys rubbing up against girls, even if they're dancers. But I'm sure most guys wouldn't want their fiancé pleasuring another guy. Almost all guys don't want their girlfriend. The bride was fucked by some macho guy. Lee looked at her. Ivy could read the unspoken question on his face. Did this happen? She shook her head with a sad smile. No, we didn't let that happen. But the bad girls got her too drunk. Ivy was thinking about a riddle she couldn't solve. When she spoke, she took a different tack. Some girls like to do that. She looked at the floor when she thought. Now she looked straight into Lee's face. I love doing this for you. She looked down, said more quietly, I love doing this for you. Poor girl, if she's like me. Ivy began to tremble. I don't know. I only did it for you. Lee couldn't help but notice his wife's hesitation. Her speech was a little confusing but clear, her syntax mostly correct. Does it mean anything when he was unfaithful? So what did she just say? I did, but I don't. The thought of doing this for anyone else disgusts me. Ivy's words brought Lee back from his thoughts. Ivy hugged him tighter. Why do you think I go to these damn events? Without waiting for an answer, she answered it herself, so that something like this doesn't happen. She sighed loudly, expressing an emotion that surprised Lee. If I had been the main chaperone, this would not have happened. I would not have let her go for a minute. I was taking care of the other girls when it became known that we had lost sight of the bride. What we found ended the party. Guilt is heightened by context. Everyone knew the evening ended abruptly. It will make them feel worse for being part of something wrong. This context will make things worse for the bride. I quickly took action, and stopped what was happening. There was no panic and all the hurry. It was necessary to quickly assess the situation. I think that all this gave me a fairly fair idea of what was happening. If he was less drunk and he really liked it, that would be her business. But she was deathly drunk, and I just don't know. I swear, the poor girl didn't seem to know what was going on. She really could have been innocent, just being used by some of her own girlfriends. The worst or deceitful ones always seem to have the upper hand in such situations. Ivy looked at her husband again. I really feel sorry for that poor girl. Last night could be the end of her life as she knew it tomorrow morning. When she wakes up and remembers or is told what she did, Ivy stopped his comment as if he was entering toxic territory. She brushed it off, saying, "Honey, it's past 3, I woke you up. I need a shower, I really do." She smiled. Looking at him appraisingly, Ivy quietly suggested, "Would you like to take him with me?" He really didn't want to. He was tired, but she really stank. Lee was sure he smelled like cigarettes just from holding it. His wife didn't smoke. Wow, they probably needed a gas mask in that place. He definitely didn't want the bed to smell like that. "I'll probably take you up on your offer," he said wearily. Ivy made him nervous, thinking that she had admitted her wrongdoing in the first place. Now he didn't want her to think that he suspected her. Luckily, she smiled at the invitation with a mischievous twinkle. As always, she was one step ahead of him. "I'm happy to pay the bill," she winked. Then her face turned red again. She heard the hesitation in his voice. Honey, maybe you don't want to, but, could you take a shower with me? You don't have to do anything. You're tired, but I don't want to be without you. The thought of losing your love is terrible for me. And this poor girl, she faces all my worst fears." Halfway through her words, Ivy saw the expression on his face. She bit her lip and her eyes filled with tears, reading his thoughts again. "Baby, I haven't cheated in our entire marriage, I swear. I couldn't. Even a rapist would have to beat me to a pulp to take me. I'm definitely not giving myself away. I'm yours. I mean it. You gave me more than my share. My cup is overflowing in and out of bed. But I've clearly made you nervous. Come on, honey, and don't feel bad about it. We must respect and guard our marriage jealousy. I'll pass. You have a completely faithful wife." She smiled. "I'm in love, honey." He tried to retreat. I trust you." She gave him an adoring smile. "I know. Now check. It's part of how we earn each other's trust. If one of us is feeling less positive, the other helps them overcome it." She smiled again, placing an open hand on his cheek. "I invite your eyes and hands to me, and then everything else. But honey, as strange as it may sound, start by checking my femininity." Lee looked puzzled. Ivy licked his ear. "Let's take me and my clothes to the bathroom. These nightclubs are like the last bastion of big tobacco. The dancers must all have lung cancer." She pulled Lee into the bathroom. She turned on the shower to warm him up. She wanted to have a dance, but quickly changed her mind. She needed to allay his fears, not provoke him. "Yeah, it's a bad idea to seduce you. It'll turn me on too. Besides, I'm still pretty drunk. I might fall over. I stopped at my partner's house for 20 or 30 minutes while we discussed what we'd have to do for the poor girl. We also drowned their sorrows in the last drink while sitting in the limousine. This drink was a bottle shared between 3. Ivy hurriedly took off her skinny jeans, still supported by Lee's strong embrace. She emphasized what she wore for her husband. For the club, skinny trousers were feminine, with the words "hands off" written all over them. Her lingerie was sexy, but not vulgar, just in the spirit of the evening. And Ivy wasn't a prude. Ivy took off her underwear, revealing her medium-long but beautifully toned legs. She was a beautiful woman. Lee loved his wife so much. She looked embarrassed as she looked at her panties. She handed them to her husband. "Honey, maybe I shouldn't tell you this, But you know, I love you more than I love myself. You want equality in everything, and I tried to live up to that, to give it to you. When you want me to take over initiative, I try not to let you down. When you want to take the lead and I happily follow you, I actually like it better. I will follow you anywhere. She took a deep breath. I probably shouldn't have said this as a woman to a man. Against the rules of the union, I think. You could cheat if it wasn't an affair just once, and that's it. It would still hurt, but I would survive it. It would be much worse for me to lose you. I am not a wuss, but you are my life. I could not cope with losing you. On the contrary, if I were unfaithful to you, it would kill me. She couldn't look at him now. You married me and made me so happy. I wanted to be the best wife for you. A particularly large tear ran down her cheek. I can't describe how much I love you. Lee came over to hug her. Then they had sex in the shower. The next day, Lee woke up late and Ivy even later. She went downstairs, afraid of the sunlight. Lee made her coffee and a couple of boiled eggs into which she dipped her toast. She began her climb up the evolutionary ladder, gradually turning from half-animal to human. Not a bad recovery after the amount of alcohol she drank last night. When the phone rang, the sound did not cause her to convulse painfully. Obviously, her ancestors were proudly watching her from their graves, and the coffin is what Ivy's expression became when she ended the conversation. After the call ended, Ivy told Lee that her friend and fiancé were going to come see them. "You mean the bride-to-be?" he asked, assessing the extent of the problem they faced. She frowned at the thought of the situation. "Exactly." Ivy showed a grimace and pleading eyes. "Honey, having a man won't be helpful to our conversation." She did apologize. "What are you going to do?" "Well, counseling her. First, I need to find out more about her and her future husband. His beliefs and attitudes will be what she will be judged on. She hurt herself, that's without a doubt. Her future depends on how he takes it. What she did, it's just the way it works. What we discussed today will follow her throughout her life." "I have a lot of yard work to do," Lee suggested, hoping he wouldn't have to leave his house. Ivy was busy and thoughtful. An idea came to her: anything noisy. Mowing the grass. "Great. I don't want her to be nervous that you might hear our conversation about her actions." "Great. Got it. I'll make some noise if I go back inside." "That's great too. Please do it." Ivy smiled at their linguistic game, then became serious again. Cheating is a sensitive issue. Having someone who might hear what she did could be very traumatic for her. Now she doesn't have to worry anymore. "And honey, don't let on that I told you this. I just didn't I can keep secrets from you." Ivy suddenly stopped, a pained expression on her face. She quickly tried to change it, glancing up to see if he had caught it. Lee looked straight at her. She wanted to close her eyes. It seems like it will never stop, Ivy thought. Lee started his yard work by mowing. He took his time and sipped his beer while he worked. He thought it would be better if, when the guest arrived, the only man around would already be in his own world of noise. He took his time with the preparation work so that he could start the noisy parts when the guest arrived rather than finishing them. Lee finished mowing and grabbed the trimmers, their whine blocking any sounds that might have come from the house. Enthralled with his work, Lee eventually finished cutting the hair. He didn't think his wife could still have guests over after this amount of time. Since he had really gotten the slow pace going, he headed to the garage. He felt that the mower was starting to choke and decided to change the spark plug. He lifted it onto the workbench because he would rather strain his back lifting the mower once than have to constantly bend over while performing maintenance. The work was not loud since he changed the spark plug and oil. Lee was surprised when the voices suddenly became louder inside the house. It seemed as if the conversation that had started in the living room had now moved to the kitchen, with only one door 3 feet separating them. The women started talking again. Crap, he promised to make noise. If he made a noise now, it might scare the poor young woman. He had to remain quiet until he was able to get out of the garage. He began to move his tools so that they would not fall and reveal his accidental presence nearby. He felt like he was living in a depth-charge scene from an old underwater movie. Now he wanted to sound like Cary Grant, charged the torpedo. Lee winced when he could hear the conversation clearly. They seemed to still be recounting the events of the previous night. They had finished the background and were now approaching the main event. Lee clearly heard his wife telling his fiancé that there was no way around the fact that she was doing this. The young woman, and yes, he insisted on continuing to call her that, thought she remembered doing it, but she wasn't even sure. Damn, he thought, the poor girl really doesn't remember what happened. Ivy was right. The girl was not in control of the situation. Lee heard Ivy respond. Lee loved her voice. It was soft and melodious as she spoke to the young woman. I was there, just like the others. You were drunk out of your mind, so we stopped it. That dancer should have known better when you were like that. Would your fiancé be upset if he found out? Yes. I don't do this, well, unless in a serious relationship. I did this to only 2 guys before I met him. I was late to this matter. Even at graduation, I didn't have sex. Then I had a guy in high school. We dated for about 8 weeks. The last 3 were pretty hot and heavy. It was my first time, but I felt really bad afterwards. The young woman continued, both guys I did this to left me cold. I felt bad, bad for the boys, bad for myself, you know. Then I met Davey. I met him in my 2nd year of college. We dated a little. In our 3rd year, we started dating seriously. We've been together ever since. I would do anything for him. I love him. I can't bear the thought of losing him. That's the selfish side. Worse than that, it would break his heart. It would. I promised him my devotion. Because he believed in me, he wasn't afraid of me going to the club. Yes, of course, I told him we were going there. I could tell him everything. Until now. He trusted me. I trusted myself. I can't believe this happened. What I remember is very hazy. I swear, if I did something like that, I thought it was Davey. I hate the thought of other guys. Davey broke all of this to win me. I didn't want guys. I didn't trust them. My only experience was not very happy. I gave the guy what he wanted, and they still left. Now, maybe I'll push away the man I love. Lee could imagine the poor girl with her face in her hands. He heard Ivy ask, "Did anyone tell you why you came here?" There was a quality in her voice that he had never heard before and could not identify. "They said you could help me." Lee involuntarily listened more closely. He knew that Ivy would tell him everything later, but this conversation was strangely exciting. "We have too much in common," Ivy said heavily and fell silent before continuing. Lee wondered what she meant. Ivy began to explain, "I have a great marriage with one of the best men. In a relationship, you get out what you put in. I'm completely devoted and in love with my husband. Maybe that's not cool in our social climate. If your girlfriends tell you that, to hell with them. Your man, if you chose him correctly, will make your life. I can't remember a time when I didn't love my husband. I got married young. He was the one, but I became pretty good at relationships before that on an initial level. I was looking forward to the wild oats. I was selective. I wasn't slutty. I've always been very careful. I liked kissing and, frankly, controlling a guy, not in a bad way, not in a way that compromised me. But someone had to be in charge, and I wanted it to be me. I did a lot of manual work. In the end, the guys were not satisfied with this. I was open to new experiments. I wanted to go further, but I was not a supporter of a gradual approach, I guess. I was open to more guys, but I quickly met Mr. Right and ended up giving myself to him. Lee filled my feelings. I don't think I could deny him anything, and I fell in love hard. Still, it was obvious that Lee was the one. Everything was and remains supercharged with him. I love him and admire him. I can't get enough of him." The young girl began to cry. Lee could imagine other women hugging her for support. His wife had clearly touched a nerve. Ivy's voice was soothing but serious. "No, you don't understand. Listen to me. I quickly became exclusive with my future husband. I loved it and him, but I missed the feeling of freedom when I could seduce any guy I wanted, even if I didn't go all the way. I've kissed dozens of guys. I've been in some really hot hugs, but I haven't had full intercourse with another man. So when I found my true love, that was it. But I love guys. They turn me on. They turn me on. The way they looked, the way they smelled, even their smell. And I missed the way it was with different guys. I started to worry about the loss of freedom, something that everyone who gets married has to deal with before marriage. I mentioned this to my friends. They wanted me to be happy. Lee noticed a significant pause while no one spoke. He tried to imagine what was happening in the kitchen. Was Ivy crying? She clearly attracted everyone's attention. Finally, she spoke again, but her tone was somber, as if she were describing a disaster scene. My bachelorette party was 2 weeks before the wedding. My friends remembered me in college going into a fraternity and choosing which guy I was going to get. I didn't have intercourse, like I said, but I got my man and usually kept him for as long as I wanted. I knew how to talk to guys, how they think, how to react. I could capture their attention, and then them. My conquests were not disappointing. I liked to bring them to the end. I just didn't. I went all the way. I liked that I could control a man and hold him as long as I liked it. I liked to excite a man by caressing him, then controlling him, retreating, or making it more intense. I was not a teaser, but rather a technique. My friends remembered this and decided that I needed one last novel, or perhaps something that would make me reconsider my marriage, something that they thought could save me from a life of happiness, I believe. Lee went cold. He had never heard the story and never knew that Ivy had any regrets about her lack of sexual partners. She said she was very pleased with him, but this new fact bothered him, because he did not believe that there were still some facts that he did not know about. Lee mused. He and Ivy had already discussed this topic. Ivy said she was done searching. Perhaps Ivy was simply emphasizing a different point of view to make a point to the student in the kitchen. But Lee knew that Ivy had ended relationships with several of her friends after their wedding. However, he did not know whether there was a specific reason for this or an actual breakup. Lee listened more intently as Ivy continued her story. After I met my true love, Lee, I never cheated and never wanted to cheat. Temptation is one thing, but acting on it is another. I was tempted and disappointed. That I didn't try more men, but I was never going to risk what I found for this. I had a gold ring and a steak dinner. Who wants to go back to popcorn? Lee breathed a sigh of relief. This seemed to answer one problem, but presented another. Ivy's first use of the word was full of bad omens. He felt his stomach tighten. My so-called friends got me drunk at a bachelorette party. I almost ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. In the process, they invited a dancer who liked me to give me a little more attention. We give in to temptation little by little. They kept pushing me, rekindling old fires, habits, and desires. And they told the guy how to win me over. It was subtle at first. I didn't notice anything. I just went deeper and deeper. Finally, they said that it was time for one last thing, only they didn't mean the last drink, but the last man. They wanted me to have one last affair. They brought me to my senses with the help of alcohol and a handsome guy. Then gradually with more lewd proposals as my inhibitions dissolved in alcohol. The context was not only that having the last man was normal, but that it was expected. Damn it, it was deserved. Now Lee could hear many women crying. How many of them were there? They all seemed to feel that the situation was all too familiar. He could hear his Ivy among them. His stomach clenched even more and his heart froze. Lee reminded himself that it was all in the past. He forced himself to remember what a wonderful wife Ivy was. What a wonderful wife she bloody well is. He waited for the threat to take shape. Ivy tried to speak in a firm voice. I have never cheated on my husband. I am very proud of this. Understand, I am not just charged with this mission, I am jet-powered. Ivy took a deep breath as she continued. I remember dancing with this dancer and not much else. He was handsome and so well built all over the place. It was okay to go with the flow or just relax because my girlfriends were protecting me. Ha! Lee could hear Ivy choking as she tried to continue. Hearing her suffering was excruciating. My friends told me the next morning that I had slept with a guy in the back room, and that I delivered he enjoyed it. They said he would have slept with me, that I was so ready, or that I was so helpless. Hell, maybe even unconscious by then. But they were afraid to let it go that far, so they stopped everything there. My pregnancy would be a disaster, even for these immoral bitches. Lee could hear the regret, horror, and disappointment in his wife's voice. It was tearing her apart. He made a mental note. His reaction was not disgust towards his wife or anger. He really wanted to relieve his wife's pain. However, if someone brought a dancer into his garage now, even 10 years from now, Lee would gladly kill him with his bare hands. Lee knew he could do it and would enjoy the process. Ivy was crying loudly now. I don't remember this, thank God. For a while, I thought they made it up. I was in a panic, and it would have been easy to calm me down by saying that it didn't happen. But damn it, no one did. That's why. I was pretty sure this happened. Ivy fell silent, defeated. I'm glad I don't have this memory to live with. But I had crushing guilt. Panic set in first. God, what if I really did it? I ran to the bathroom. How far had I gone? I really did this. My friends saw how scared I was when I heard about my infidelity and realized that I was serious and that they had ruined everything. I have never spoken to my two girlfriends since then, not a word at the wedding or rehearsal. If only I had rejected them before, it would raise questions. This fear has strengthened me. I'm not telling you that it was good what happened to you last night, but it doesn't have to be a terrible sin that will ruin both your life and your fiancé's. You can make something out of it different and great if you are guided by your heart. Now Lee was listening. The situation was completely different from what he had begun to fear. Somehow this all led to how much he cares for his wife. Ivy was still sobbing, although it had lessened in intensity a little. I couldn't believe I did it. Of course, I was tempted by what I gave up. But I give up on ice cream during bikini season. Discipline and love are not mutually exclusive. I was proud that I had found a man I was committed to. I was happy to find a man that I could fall in love with. And now I was damaged. I was going to tell my fiancé he deserved to know. Wiser heads, other women, not my so-called friends, said something important. Having learned of my alleged infidelity, Lee would have taken more time than 2 weeks before the wedding to deal with it. They forced me to look at what I am really going to do with Lee. Yes, he could decide to marry me or not. But what about the limited time, and the money issues associated with rent and wedding plans, and the family animosity of everyone knowing that his bride is a dancer's pleasure? Would the wedding have happened at all? What if poor Lee just kept quiet and didn't tell anyone, marrying me so quickly that he would have questions and anger that he wouldn't have time to properly express instead of living with his dream girl, the best one? The scenario seemed to be that he was now stuck with me. Over time, this could separate us. These real friends told me that I was trapped anyway. They wanted to make sure I was seeing the bigger picture. They pointed out that I didn't know if I had done what my false friend said. If I was unfaithful, I had never done anything like this before. I knew enough and had enough experience to know that I didn't want what happened. There were many ways to make sure it never happened again. They also indicated that the situation made me angry and upset in itself. They said that this anger was not misplaced. They said that I should have acted much better since I decided to go to the club with these bitches. This combination was stupid. Going with another group to a club might have worked. Going with wild friends, but ensuring there weren't any guys there might have been safe, but mixing them up was really stupid. But bad decisions could cost me everything. Then I thought about life without my lover. Oh God, oh, it was terrible. It knocked me out of control for several days. It made me want him with all my being, with every cell. But I didn't deserve him. They too. Then they said about it. In the end, there were 4 reasons why the best choice I could have made was the worst choice I've ever made. Worse than anything I could have done to a dancer. I didn't tell the person I respected the most about that's the only thing I didn't share with Lee. Not sharing my suspicions with him was the worst thing I ever did. Unlike what I might have done at the bachelorette party, it was a conscious decision, so there's no way to tell that it was not evil. However, it was the least evil of all the possible choices. Even the reasons that made this the least evil choice are twisted and twisted. First of all, there is no evidence, even for myself, there is no evidence to convict, and none to exonerate. Look, if I knew, even if I had the slightest proof that I had done this, I would immediately run to Lee and admit, I respect him so much. I would accept his verdict. But were these bitches lying to me? My false friends almost convinced me that I had committed this heinous act until wise heads forced me to look at the facts again. Their goal was not to get me off the hook, but to honestly assess whether I was on the hook. There was no definite evidence one way or the other. The time frame suggested that I didn't do it. There wasn't enough time away from the main group to support any kind of strong-willed affair. Not like I've done it before. It never made sense that I would suddenly fall into old habits and perform them completely differently than I ever did. So why did my old friends say I did it? There were some disturbing answers. Did they just want me back with them, so they provided the opportunity and provocation for me to run away from my man? Did they think misfortune loves company? I successfully met Mr. Right, and they didn't. Were they trying to destroy us to make themselves feel better? Besides, by making me confess to something that never happened, they would take all the blame away from themselves, wouldn't they? Unfortunately, it seemed too close to what they could come up with. I wasn't about to ruin myself, and more importantly, Lee, by admitting that today, I still doubt what really happened. Second, I really tried my best, gave everything to make his life great. Lee is the most wonderful person I have ever met. I love him completely, and I can say that my choice was selfish, but also the best. I don't know a happier couple than I've ever done. I seriously doubt it would have been if I had told Lee less than 2 weeks before our wedding that I might have been unfaithful, giving up all our dreams for something that people told me about, but that I don't remember. Still, not telling him was unfair, and I still feel terrible about it. Then I ask myself, what would have happened to both of us if he no longer wanted me after what he heard? Did I deceive him? But what could I control? What did I know what to do? I was helpless that night and helpless about that night. Lee is the best person I've ever met. It would have tormented him and undermined his confidence in me. I couldn't predict what happened that night, but I couldn't even take action to ensure a positive future. Prove an affair in the past, even though I couldn't prove my innocence. If I was innocent, Lee didn't deserve to lose his future because of the accusations of haters. He was happy. I did everything I could to make him happy, and I was happy to do it. I was extremely happy to be with him. I know it's an excuse, although that doesn't make it untrue. Third, Lee looks at me like I'm something special. If I told him he'd still love me, that's the kind of person he is. But I'm not sure I'd ever see that special look in his eyes again. Perhaps more importantly, Lee feels like I'm really so special, and it lights him up all day long, but I try to stay on that pedestal because it brings him so much joy. If we're talking about punishing me, okay, until it takes away his joy, then it takes on a completely different meaning. This is one of the paradoxes of love. It seems completely selfish to me, but it is not so, really not so. I would die before I would allow myself to be less than that for him. Part of it is selfish. I love that he looks at me like that. But the other part is that I would rather die than not have to do everything to be that girl for him. He deserves that girl, and I did everything to be this girl. It's not just a fantasy. This girl is me. She is true and loving, and these are all those things that I really feel. Stupid university bitches did. He doesn't deserve this for trusting me and loving me. I would die to protect him. It may seem like self-justification now, but soon, when you live with the person you love, you will understand that it is me. And fourth, I really was that woman for him. Loyal, devoted, deeply in love. And without a doubt, all those little what-ifs that my false friends introduced have completely burned out over the years. Lee is all that I want wrapped in one beautiful package. I would do everything for him. Maybe part of what I told you is just an excuse. I really don't believe that I did it just for myself. I hope I put it there too. His needs come first. I tried very hard. Maybe it's an excuse, but I'm doing what I would say. I'm taking the right steps. I'm going along this path. Ivy got ready. Lee could hear her breathing deeply outside the door. The next part is selfish. This is what I found and confessed to you. I could tell him now. I could, he would understand. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I would lose that look with which he looks at me, who says I'm special to him. I'm afraid that would still take the polish off the apple in his eyes. Even though we've been together long enough to both believe that I never made a conscious choice to please this guy. I mean, if this happened, it was most likely a case where I was only semi-conscious at best, and this freak took advantage of me at the instigation of my girlfriends. There is nothing in this that would correspond to my character either before or since. The problem now is that I haven't told him about it for so long. This fact could really hurt his feelings. I was planning on never telling him, but telling you all this today, I think I should. I can't hold it in anymore. Is a secret from him, and he deserves better from me. By not telling him about the suspicions before our wedding, I deceived him into making the decision to marry me or leave me. If he thought I was unfaithful, leaving me might have been worth it, benefit him, and would cost me dearly. This is difficult to bear, the thought that I could do this to the person I supposedly love. I mean, not only that I could change, but also that I deprived him of the opportunity. Make a choice. Then there's the fact that I'm not sure myself if this really happened. There's also the fact that I tried my best to ensure the best outcome for him. So those are things that he'll have to weigh. The problem is that it really should have been his decision back then, before our wedding. Even if it was for the best reasons, it doesn't justify it. There was silence and a change of mood. Then Ivy spoke again, but in a more protective and instructive manner. Ivy said, "Let's get back to you. If I were you, would I tell my man about what happened last night? I don't think I would. I would think long and hard about it first. I don't want to, so that you start life together with a lie. But if your triple selection situation shows you as it did to me, then you know that you will be faithful and devote your life to making up for it, so that in the end you will not just make amends, but make his life is wonderful because you love him. If your future husband is truly exceptional, perhaps you can be honest. If so, the sooner the better. But most men will see a ruined version of the picture they loved. There's nothing you can do about it, but to him you are no longer his only one, which is probably an important part of the puzzle that makes up his image of you. He may forget all the previous men because he won you over them and left them behind. But this dancer turned out to be satisfied with you after you agreed. Getting married. Your future husband will see this man when you talk or when you kiss. This is a lot to overcome. How about we put it to him like what could have happened to me, that you were out of your mind and the guy took advantage of the situation. Too many people have seen you looking pretty happy. We're still trying to find the phones, we think. That everyone got together last night, and yes, some of your girlfriends took photos. Lee heard the sighs and groans caused by this news. Listen, we made all the girls give us their phones before we let them out of the limo. We searched their phones and deleted anything that could harm you or them. We were there to protect even the bad ones from themselves. Lee heard the general noise drop to levels before the revelation of the photographs, and he heard his wife begin to speak again. I'll talk to your man, tell him you've been out of your mind, if that's what you need or want. I really believe that. But if you have false friends like I do, and there's some way they can plant a seed of doubt in his mind, then fair or not, you may not get over it. Don't lie to him, but don't light the fuse yourself. I would wait until the accusations arise and let me and others deal with them first. And it is important that you understand why. You are not only protecting yourself. Chances are your man wants to worship you in some pure way. I'm afraid this adventure makes you a bit of a damaged goods, which deprives your husband of that chance. I'm not saying your man is terrible, but it is not the picture of you he wants. He doesn't need to doubt that you want others more than him, that he's not good enough, or that you can't control yourself. He doesn't need to doubt your truthfulness when you're not in his presence. He needs to have confidence. He may love you for you, but you are also the ultimate trophy for him. I won this girl and took her from every other man in the world. She is a shining beacon that someone is choosing me over everyone else. This woman loves me and will protect me from everyone else on earth. These things he has to believe in will be hard when he can't forget that on the first night without him some guy was satisfied. He doesn't need doubts. He will have enough self-doubt. You need to be his source of confidence. There was a pause before Lee heard his wife confirm, "Okay, forgiveness for what happened is a level of maturity that can take a man 30 years or more to establish, and yet you're asking it from a 20-year-old when you haven't proven yourself yet. This is a difficult combination to overcome. But this doesn't have to be the end either. Take him and love him and never let him go. Hold him and look at him in robes of wonder and awe. I'll be here when you need to talk about what you've done." Lee heard the women make noise. This was the sound of the end of the main performance. The worried bride thanked her mistress, hugged her tightly, smiling through her tears, and left. Lee sat in the garage for a moment, processing what he had just heard, weighing the decisions his wife made, especially the ones she made for both of them without asking him. She never did anything like that again. He assessed her situation at that time. He knew she didn't just talk to get what she wanted. She really doubted she did it. He had no doubt about it. Lee played the game. He imagined that he caught his wife satisfying another man today. He was struck by the horror and anger that coursed through him over the imaginary situation. Now he thought about what might have happened those years ago. She didn't do it on purpose, didn't enjoy it, and shared the humiliation as a lesson for the poor bride as a huge negative experience. Ivy didn't keep a secret that benefited herself from him at his expense. She didn't want to have this secret. She hated him, but she held him, believing that she was protecting him on several levels. She constantly put in effort and worked to make the situation work for him. Again, he felt no malice towards her, but if someone had pointed at the dancer, he would have beaten him. Lee learned an important lesson about himself through this simple exercise. About 20 minutes later, he made a loud show of removing the lawnmower from his workbench and putting things away in the garage. He deliberately made a noisy show by opening the door to the kitchen. He smiled purposefully to emphasize the sound performance. Other than that, he behaved normally. Ivy looked at him with a sad, worried face, but smiling at his stupid display, just like he intended. He nodded towards the refrigerator, silently offering her some wine while he got himself a beer. Ivy shook her head and asked, "You know I love you, right?" "Yes, I know that, dear." He tried to look puzzled as he unscrewed the cap of the beer. "You know I love you completely, right?" Ivy fought against the impending tremor in her voice. Lee smiled. "Yeah, I know that, honey." He purposely showed some confusion now. Ivy looked thoughtful. She asked, "What is your favorite special place in the world?" Lee smiled widely, answering without much thought. "Two places, the beach where we got engaged, and wherever you are." Ivy cried, "Damn it, this man had her." Ivy looked at him, holding his gaze for long seconds, then looked away. She spoke softly, but with as much volume as she could muster. "Lee, if I were to tell you something you don't want to hear, would it be better in one of these places, or would it ruin this special place?" Lee pretended to sit down opposite her and put down the beer. He wanted to joke that one of the places was where she was, and it would be hard for him not to be there if she was close to telling him something. This was not the time for his quirky humor. Instead, he let Ivy know that she had his full attention, which she seemed to need. He made it clear that he was consoling her and did not need consolation himself. "How bad is the news?" Lee asked quietly and confidently. Ivy thought as she formulated her answer. At some point, it would be bad. Although I think that, with our feelings for each other, it would still work. But now I'm not sure what you'll do. You might hit me, might slap me, might give me some righteous intense sex, might just make me laugh. I'm not really sure. I get different feelings depending on what your mood is when you hear it. It won't stop me from loving you, and I dare to say that you will not stop loving me. I have unconditional confidence in you." She smiled at him. "But it will affect how and how much you love me." "What kind of news?" His voice was serious now. It seemed right for her. I think you'll be more hurt now by the fact that I hid this from you than by what happened. It's not even what I did. It's more what happened, and I got scared and—" Lee stopped her. "Something like what happened to that girl last night, or worse." He asked this in a normal tone, completely calm. Ivy looked at him with her huge eyes. Lee knew her so well, but what did this mean for them right now? There was no condemnation in his face, only love and care. Taking care of her. He has already started to figure it out. He must have seen something last night, but his concern was for her. She loved this man. She started crying. Not as bad, but in the same category. He didn't say anything, he thought. She detected no disgust, no anger, nothing to indicate that she had lost him. But is she still special? "So, here or on the beach?" Ivy asked, trying to be brave as tears streamed down her cheeks. Lee was calm. "Has he seen you naked?" He took over the leadership. God bless him, he knew her so well. He was going to walk her through this without giving her the opportunity to say anything wrong. How could he be so perfect for her? Only at this moment did it make her possible violation feel much worse. Ivy knew this was the opposite of what her husband wanted. Love is an amazing thing. "No, I wasn't naked." "Did he see your breasts or any part of you like that?" "No." She was so glad she could say that. "Ivy, take off your clothes for me." She was confused, but she stood right there in the kitchen and began to undress. She would do it for him if he would just come home and ask. The strange thing was the context. "Why, dear?" she asked, throwing her shirt to the floor. "You just told me that you weren't naked for him. I thought it might help to hear me share as a reminder that I don't share." She started crying harder. Her lower lip trembled. "You are the best." Ivy hurried to remove the rest of her clothes. She stood naked in front of him and said, "I love you. Nothing has happened during our marriage, and I will never let it happen. But before that, there was something that happened. At my bachelorette party." Ivy's head dropped and her shoulders slumped, as if she had completely lost her strength. "Did this happen more than once?" Lee interrupted her. His behavior had become authoritarian now, but she noticed that there was no accusation or defense. He asserted himself, but not at her expense. "No." Lee looked Ivy straight in the eyes. She realized that her husband really wanted her to understand his next point. "Ivy, do you really want to tell me? Maybe you shouldn't worry." Now he looked around as if he were indifferent, his flippancy towards such a serious matter emphasizing his point. Ivy lost her breath. She was stunned. She saw the pretense for what it was. He may not feel that way, but he was offering her. "Wow," she thought, "this is an amazing gift. Forgiveness before the fact. No wonder I love him so much. How does he always love me even more than I think?" Ivy had deprived Lee of his opportunity to speak out years ago, and she wasn't going to do it again. Deciding that she should now respect and honor him properly, especially after his offer of mercy, she began to confess, I hate having something that I haven't told you. This is the only thing I've never told you." Lee leaned closer, placing his eyes directly in line with his wife's. "Would it make you feel better if you told me?" The question confused her. Yeah, I guess. I just feel like I shouldn't hide anything." "Are you really going to feel better?" Lee asked with obvious concern. Although she could tell he wasn't sure, her answer was emphatic despite her fear of the outcome. "Yes." "Then tell me." Ivy knew she looked puzzled by his answer. Lee interrupted before she could continue. "If it only happened once." He tilted his head, nudging her to answer. "Yes, never again, yes." Ivy answered with sincerity. "And you love me?" "Oh yes, I love you." Lee again pretended to be comfortable with the idea, slowly relaxing. "Then, if it would be easier for you not to tell me, I can live with it." She was shaking. "Lee, I'm afraid that most of our relationship is actually selfish, and I think this is too." Lee interrupted again. "Oh my God, Ivy, everything you do for me, and you think our love is selfish. Did you have it?" There was no malice in the question. Ivy blushed. She shook her head no, but wondered if it was actually true since she didn't want to lie. Lee, my love, this is very confusing, even for me. I can't really admit my guilt or my innocence. I was told that something happened when I was too drunk to remember. I don't know whether the girls who told me this were telling the truth. They were the least reliable there. I never had any confirmation, and I tried my best to find or deny what they said. Ivy tried to swallow, but found it difficult to do so. But it is entirely possible that I received something from the mail. Dancer. I did not intentionally initiate or even carry out the action required to do this. Receiving. I was on autopilot at the time and had to take others' word for it. Ivy finally swallowed, looking away. Even though there were other women who swore there wasn't enough time for me to do what they claimed, my story is too similar to what happened last night. To Lee, her clumsy choice of words was just that, and nothing more. Ivy was clearly trying to tell him what could have happened rather than making things easier for herself. But how do you tell the person who sees you as the pinnacle of the species that you don't deserve that title? He felt her. Ivy thought and said, "The important point is that I don't know. Another point is that if this happened, I was so out of it that I couldn't be active." She looked away, then forced herself to look at him. "I'm not trying to paint the best possible picture for myself. I can provide you with plenty of people who will corroborate my state of intoxication on both sides of the accusation." "He took you?" Ivy heard her husband's question. No, we didn't. We didn't. It wasn't an act of love, that's for sure. We didn't copulate, that's for sure." She forgot she was naked, desperately searching for something to say. Damn, she had done this years ago. She still remembered it all too well, having reviewed that terrible night thousands of times since then. But it also blunted it in some aspects. However, this was new to Lee. She reminded herself that this would be raw for him. Her eyes just became waterfalls. "I'm sorry, Lee. I'm sorry I put you in this position. You should never have doubted me. I had false friends, and I wasn't mature enough to understand it. And now the dirt they threw at me has tainted you. You don't deserve this, and you love me and only me now?" "Yes, and not a day goes by that I don't regret what could have happened. But, darling, no matter what I did then, I made a choice. I decided not to tell you then. It's terrible, isn't it? I thought I had better reasons now. Now I'm not so sure. And I don't just love you now, I loved you then too, I think, almost from the day we met." Ivy was on the verge of panic. Lee's eyes were warm and kind. "Honey, don't be nervous. There's no need. What did you tell me last night? If I ever cheated?" "Lee, I'm not sure if those words should apply to me. It's up to you to decide. However, your words to me were you'll get through this. It meant that if I failed once, you would still love me despite your pain, that you wouldn't tear me apart in your pain, and that you would work to keep what we have intact. Now the shoe may actually be on the other foot for real. If I make the decision alone and on my own, then you will truly get over it." He reached out, placing his hand on the side of her face, stroking her ear with his thumb. "Besides, you've been regretting something for a decade, living with that pain for so long, trying to protect us, and now you find the strength to tell me. It's hard." Gently weaving his fingers into her hair, he began to pull her forward. "You will love me as I ask now. We will go to the ocean soon. Tonight we will sneak to the beach, and I will have you again where you once promised me to be mine for life. By doing this, you will make me the happiest person on earth, as you have done consistently for over 10 years. Ivy fell to her knees, the air knocked out of her as she looked up at him and cried through her beaming smile. Both understood that her promise was before the possible affair, and he was happy as she promised all this time, even with her possible affair. She was so grateful to him. Regardless of whether she was hooked or not, Lee had no intention of letting her in now. She looked at him with admiration. "You're too good to be true." "Perhaps not. You deserve this answer from me, but we both know what I would do to that man if he were here now, and we don't know if he is guilty too." She trembled as she looked at Lee. She squeezed her eyes. He loved her so much that she could accidentally turn him into a murderer of an innocent man. She had never considered this aspect. What would have happened if she had told him years ago? She hated the thought. "Honey, tell me what you want and let's go." He took her face in his hands. He made sure that contact had been made. There was only love in his eyes and touch. She felt it from him. There was not even a need for forgiveness. She thought she might faint with the knowledge that if she really needed it, he had already provided it. He always found a way to be more than she ever thought possible. Lee finally spoke. He wanted Ivy to understand something very important, something he wanted her to understand. "Don't worry, my love. To me, you will always be the most special girl in the world." Her heart almost jumped out of her chest. She rushed to him, hugging him as tightly and desperately as she could, like never before. She sobbed, shouting through a smile, "I love you." Lee thought, "She thinks that what I said is a coincidence. With what she said to that young woman today, she thinks that she has received the praise of Providence, and indeed she has. The delivery method was just a little different than she thinks. For my Ivy, this coincidence gives her victory over her uncertainty. She needed to hear the word special. She kept this unhappy secret from me for 10 years. I can keep this happy secret from her as long as I need to. Her burden has become mine. It's an easy burden because to me, more than anything, Ivy really is that special." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to